Welcome to Football Game Plan's College Football Kickoff. I'm Emory Hunt, the czar of the playbook, and wow, it's already week 4 in the college football season, and there's a lot to get into in this episode. Let's start with our storylines heading into week 4 as we go into our 4-minute offense. Jackson State named Deion Sanders as its 21st head coach in program history. Sanders, who coaches high school football, is taking over a program that many feel is a sleeping giant program in the college football and HBCU landscape. What makes this hire so intriguing and exciting, for that matter, is that Coach Sanders is coming in with a recognizable name and brand that has transcended generations. So kids nowadays still know who he was as a player and who he currently is right now. So you imagine that he is sitting across from you in your living room trying to get you to come play for his program. So in my opinion, that's why the hire makes sense. That's where the hire will have the biggest impact and influence on the recruiting front, and that's going to be most beneficial for not only Jackson State, but for HBCU football as a whole. Sanders has already gotten some guys to flip commitments and transfer out of Power 5 programs to Jackson State. His success on the recruiting trail, I believe, will make things a lot easier for other coaches within the conference to also go toe-to-toe with the Power 5 schools for the top-tier players. Now, having Sanders also brings more attention to the SWAC and will shine the light on the great job that many of the coaches who are already in the conference are doing, like Alcorn State's Fred McNair, Grambling's Broderick Fobbs, Southern's Dawson Odoms, FAMU's Willie Simmons, Alabama State's Donald Hill Ely, Alabama A&M's Connell Maynard, Prairie View A&M's Eric Dooley, and Bethune-Cookman's Terry Sims. These coaches are some of the best in college football and have done an outstanding job with their team so far. Adding a Deion Sanders to the mix, to me at least, just raises the profile of the entire conference. So this was a great hire by Jackson State. With the Pac-12 returning to football, all 5 power conferences are now back in season. Now, the Pac-12 has committed to a 7-game conference season with a championship game starting November 6th and going through December 18th. Now, it doesn't have any bye weeks, so it makes it a bit tough for teams to run that gauntlet and hopefully get into the playoffs, but at least we have the Pac-12 back. And we also have the Mountain West Conference coming back as well. 8-game conference season with a championship game starting October 24th, so they'll go a bit sooner than the Pac-12, and they'll run through December 19th with their title game. So we'll see if a team out of these group of 5 conferences, because this is a year that many can make that move and get into the playoffs, but it's good to see both the Pac-12 and the Mountain West Conference return to the football field. And while we're on the topic of returning to the field, that's what Rondell Moore of Purdue is doing. He's going to opt back into the 2020 season and get back out there for the Boilermakers. This is a big time decision for Moore because he got injured early last season and would have gone a full year plus of not playing football. So NFL scouts would have not been able to see whether or not he was back healthy, he was still his explosive playmaking self, and coming back now to play football helps ease a lot of those concerns. So this is not only a great decision for Rondell Moore, but also for that Purdue offense as a whole, because Purdue really needs him. They utilize him in a multitude of ways, and having him back out there only increases their chances of making some noise in the truncated Big Ten season. And even though it's week 4, yes, there are still some teams right now that have to really dig deep and figure out how to turn their season around. So we'll focus on those teams in our gut check. And we'll start with the Georgia State Panthers, who had the Louisiana Raging Cajuns beat last weekend. They did a great job, I thought, in all 3 facets: offense, defense, special teams. I love the aggressiveness and the athleticism that they displayed on the defensive side of football. And offensively, they were taking their shots deeper down the field. They were dominating up front for the early part of the game. Their true freshman quarterback did a great job in growing right in front of our eyes. But we saw how that game ended. They lost the lead, lost it in overtime, and they can't allow that one loss to become 2. So they're going to really have to dig deep to try to find a resolve to forget last week and move on to this week, as they have a very tough matchup against the Charlotte 49ers. You also look at Iowa State, another team that took a loss to the Louisiana Raging Cajuns way back in week 1. Now, this is a game for Iowa State that they have upcoming this weekend against a TCU squad that's looking to establish themselves this season, and Iowa State wants to right the ship and get their chances of making the Big 12 title game back on track. So it's going to have to be like Georgia State. They're going to have to forget what happened last week. Brock Purdy will have to play a much better game than he did against the Raging Cajuns. If he can do that, then Iowa State will be just fine moving on the rest of the way. I also think it's gut check time for the UL-MONROE WARHAWKS. You're looking at their 2 top NFL prospects right there in tight end Josh Peterson and running back Josh Johnson. Those 2 guys really have to get going in order for this WARHAWKS offense to really start to take off. Right now, they're not doing exactly what you expect that offense to do that has 2 premier players. And on defense, Corey Straughter, the outstanding cornerback, is another NFL prospect. And on defense, we've seen them give up multiple big plays in the passing game. So it's definitely gut check time for UL-MONROE and that football team as they get a get-right game this week against the UTEP Miners. And finally, the Tulane Green Wave really have to dig deep and forget what happened last week. We saw the collapse against the Navy Midshipmen. They were up 24-0 and looked dominant in the first half until Navy continued to stay on track, stay on pace, make some key plays defensively, start to pop offensively with their option attack and also in the passing game, and found themselves coming back into that ball game and ultimately winning it. Tulane has to forget what happened. Tulane has to remember when you have a lead, you have to continue to play with that same level of aggressiveness. You have to keep your foot on the gas. Otherwise, what happened last week could be a sign of more things to come in the future. Be sure to order your copy of the Go-Go Offense by Coach Brennan Marion on footballgameplan.com/GoGoOffense. Coach Marion goes through the ins and outs of his explosive offense, one that's tearing up the college football field and putting a lot of points on the scoreboard. Again, you can order your copy at footballgameplan.com/GoGoOffense. Welcome back to Football Game Plan's College Football Kickoff. I'm Emory Hunt, the czar of the playbook, and now it's time to take a look at some of those guys that we may see out here in New York City for the Heisman Trophy in our Week 4 Heisman Watch. We know winning the Heisman Trophy is always about signature plays or Heisman moments, and rivalry games give you an ample opportunity to provide both of those type plays and moments. So when you look at Miami's D'Eriq King, the outstanding quarterback, going up against their hated rival, the Florida State Seminoles, this is an opportunity for him to stack both signature plays and Heisman moments in one game. I also look at Oklahoma's quarterback Spencer Rattler and what he did in the previous game against Southeast Missouri State, throwing touchdown after touchdown. Now there's a bit step up in weight class here against Kansas State, but nonetheless an opportunity for him to stack highlight plays and signature moments. You talk about signature moments, you're going to see one every week, in my opinion, from Sam Ehlinger, who has it on his mind to be the best he can be and try to elevate his team into the playoffs. So Texas this week gets Texas Tech. That's an opportunity to stack those plays that we've been talking about all throughout the segment. And no one had the most signature highlight play package last week than Trevor Lawrence and his couple of plays against the Citadel, where he was throwing dime after dime for touchdowns. Now, again, that's the Citadel, but if he can continue to do this moving forward, he's going to make that stranglehold that he already has on the Heisman Trophy so tight, it's going to pop the head off the award. Before we get into our game previews for the weekend, let's take a look at some of the key individual matchups you want to keep an eye on this upcoming weekend. Let's start with the Virginia Cavaliers and their outstanding linebacker edge rusher in Charles Snowden. He's super athletic, he's a lengthy guy, and I think there's a great matchup this week between him and that Duke offensive front. Wherever they decide to put him on that front line, he's going to have a huge challenge in getting back there and disrupting the passing game of Chase Brice. But you also look at what they have in Devery Hamilton, the right tackle who transferred in from Stanford, outstanding NFL prospect. So it would be interesting to see both Snowden and Hamilton matched up against one another throughout the course of the game, because Snowden, if he can make an impact early, he's going to be a guy that can push his name higher and higher up the draft board and get into the first round conversation. I look at that Pitt-Louisville game and focus on Pitt's defense and those two safeties I'm a big fan of, Damar Hamlin and Paris Ford, and how they defend Tutu Atwell in the passing game of Louisville. We know Hamlin is one of those ferocious type hitters, and how well he plays the alley versus those jet sweeps and little crossing routes that they want to get to Tutu Atwell, and how Paris Ford has the discipline and the ability to close on the deep ball that they'll try to hit with Atwell deeper down the field. So how well those two safeties play and try to game plan and take away one of college football's biggest threats will be must-see TV, and a matchup that Pitt definitely has to win. Another game where the defense will have to win their matchup more specifically is the Texas Longhorns at secondary against Texas Tech. They're led by their outstanding safety, Caden Stearns. And when you look at that secondary, Jalen Green at corner, Deshaun Jameson at corner, and also BJ Foster, another safety, all of those guys will have to have their best day against that passing attack of Texas Tech. We know they like to work touchdown to check down. They're going to try to spread the field and force you to make plays in space consistently. And if they can't do so, Alan Bowman in that passing game will have success against Texas. So if Texas wants to truly be back, this is an opportunity for them to showcase their defensive strength against the Red Raiders.
Well, the game of football has taught me so many things, man. Now, think about the huddle we have right now, right? I tell people this all the time. There's a reason why they call it a huddle. You know, people have been huddling all their lives, trying to find ways to enhance each other's lives. The great teams do that all the time. The great teams do that. The better the huddle, the better the team. And so it's simple, man, how if you huddle for all the right reasons, we wouldn't have Ferguson. We wouldn't have some of the challenges that we have in our society. But as we all know, there's always a moment when somebody doesn't belong in the huddle. And yet we have to continue to move on. We got to continue to play. So the game of life, man, is always starting with a huddle. And for me, I'm lucky enough to know that, you know, by the graces of God, man, it's been a nice huddle. It's been a nice huddle. And if I just keep making sure that he's in front of me, I'm gonna be all right.
And now it's time to preview some of the games this weekend on the schedule. And since we welcome back the SEC, I felt as though it was proper to start with the national champion LSU Tigers as they play host to Mississippi State. What an intriguing matchup to kick off the SEC season, as you have Mississippi State breaking in a new head coach in Mike Leach, along with a new quarterback in KJ Costello transferring from Stanford. But this spread offense and that up-tempo passing game, that air raid offense going up against an SEC defense. But this is an LSU football team that has lost so many players and members of their staff, Joe Brady and Dave Aranda, along with the Heisman Trophy winning quarterback, the majority of their offensive line, 2 stud linebackers, and a stud safety. So I'm interested to see how this defense will respond to the quick up-tempo air raid style. And oh, by the way, Mississippi State has a premier tailback in Colin Hill, who's going to be running in wide open space against this Tiger defense. Is going to be shuffling in some new players and trying to get off to a good start defensively under Bo Pelini's new defense. So this is a very interesting game, one that I think Mississippi State has a chance, because of some experience, to go into Death Valley and get the victory. I like the Bulldogs to win. Next up, we got Army traveling to Cincinnati to take on the Bearcats. This is a very good football game. I'm excited to watch this one this weekend. Army is coming in off of 2 weeks of rest, and they face the Cincinnati Bearcats squad that has a very good offense, very good quarterback in Desmond Ridder, and a solid all-around defense. But for Army, that triple option is deadly. It helps them shrink the ball game, but the story this year for them has been a defense that's been much better than what we saw in 2019, and Cincinnati will have to overcome that aspect while also trying to get that triple option offense off the field. I do see a very close game when it'll come down to the wire, but I think Army has an opportunity because of the preparation they have juxtaposed to the 1 week Cincinnati had to prepare for their triple option attack. I'm taking the Black Knights. Georgia State takes on Charlotte in a very good matchup, one that's going to be settled by point of attack play like it was last week versus Louisiana. And we spoke earlier about Georgia State having to be in gut check mode right now as they take on the 49ers. But I like what I saw last week with their point of attack play. Their offensive line is athletic. They're big. They can move guys off the spot. And defensively, they were active, especially with the back seven flying down and run support. Now, Trey Harbison of Charlotte, as you see here, is an outstanding running back. Gives them an opportunity to win many games on their schedule. But I do think we'll see a quick turnaround and resolve from Georgia State. I like the Panthers. The freshman quarterback will get better every game as he gains more experience. They now know what it takes to close out an opponent. I think they will do just that against Charlotte. Two teams that are trying to rebound from embarrassing losses last week. Tulane travels to Southern Miss. We saw the Green Wave collapse against Navy, and we saw Southern Miss defense just completely collapse in the fourth quarter, allowing Louisiana Tech to drive down the length of the field and get the game-winning points at the end of the game where the receiver got the 1 foot down in bounds. But in this matchup, you look at the offense and which defense can you trust. So starting with the offense, I love Tulane's offensive coordinator, Will Hall, and what he's able to do from a designing play standpoint. He also calls right plays at the right time. His offense was clicking early on against Navy, and I think they have a chance to have success. That's why I don't trust Southern Miss's defense, because of what I saw last week against Louisiana Tech. I think there's going to be some opportunities for Tulane to generate some huge chunk plays on the ground and then through the air. So I like Tulane to go on the road and knock off Southern Miss. We have a nice ACC matchup between NC State and Virginia Tech, who is finally starting to play a game after multiple cancellations derailed the early parts of their season. But this game will be about defense. When you talk about NC State, you love Ibrahim Conte and what he brings to the table out there on the edge. Hayden Hooker, the quarterback for Virginia Tech, will have to find ways to buy himself time and find targets deep down the field. But when you look at NC State and how they played last week versus Wake Forest, I think that's going to carry over into a team that was struggling to put together a bunch of healthy players out there that wasn't going through contact tracing during practice. I think because of that, and this is their first game, they're going to come out sputtering, I believe, offensively. I'm taking NC State. Kansas State and Oklahoma meet up in a Big 12 matchup that features two of my favorite quarterbacks to watch in college football, and that's Skylar Thompson of Kansas State and Spencer Rattler of Oklahoma. And I think if Kansas State has a chance in this ball game, they're going to have to find ways to get creative on offense, and we know they can do that with Thompson, but they have two tremendous tailbacks in my opinion, and Deuce Vaughn, the freshman, and Harry Trotter, who I like a lot. So getting those guys in space matched up against those OU linebackers could help them out as far as staying on the field and making things happen inside the red zone. But it's going to be up to their defense to slow down Spencer Rattler in that passing game. They work touchdown to check down most definitely. And if that defense, which had trouble against Arkansas State in their passing game, comes to the same matchup versus Oklahoma with the same type of mentality and game plan, it could really get ugly. I do foresee a closer contest, and I think Kansas State will do a great job of forgetting what happened against Arkansas State and focusing in on the Sooners. But Oklahoma right now is still too powerful, still too explosive, and will do a great job of closing out the Wildcats. Lane Kiffin begins his tenure as the Ole Miss head football coach as they take on the Florida Gators, who I believe are the best team in the SEC East. They're the most complete team as they have the experienced quarterback in Kyle Trask, a very solid defense returning, and good stable players up front along the line of scrimmage and also in the backfield. So they are probably more ready to hit the ground running in this division, especially on that side of the division, than any team in the conference outside of Alabama. So we'll see a very well-rounded Florida squad. Will we see that same effect on Ole Miss's season, since that we have not seen a spring practice? We haven't seen how well they can integrate those pieces. This is a truncated offseason. So how will Lane Kiffin get Jerrion Ealy involved in a run game? What can he do with John Reese Plumlee, the outstanding dual threat quarterback? A lot of that is still unknown as we head into this game, but I do think Florida has enough defense and also the offense to really grind it out, find their way, and knock out Ole Miss. Usually when we talk West Virginia and Oklahoma State meeting up on the football field, we're going to talk about offense. How many points will be scored? Will they break the scoreboard? How many yards will they gain? This year, maybe we talk about both defenses, because I think West Virginia has a chance to be really good on that side of the football. Darius Stills is back up front, giving them a key cog in the middle to help stop Chuba Hubbard in that run game. And on the other side, Oklahoma State's defense is really what kept them in that ball game against Tulsa, to where their offense found time to get back on track and help them win the game. So maybe the defenses in this game will be the key. So on offense, who can supersede good defensive play and who has the playmakers? I think that leans a little bit toward Oklahoma State. Although they don't have Spencer Sanders back there at quarterback, they still have Tylan Wallace, they still have Chuba Hubbard, they still have a very good offensive line. So we'll see another tightly contested, close game between two teams that are looking to change the tide of how we talk about Big 12 because of their defenses. Another matchup we're focused on in the SEC is Tennessee at South Carolina. It should be a very good game. Tennessee's offensive line is tremendous. Trey Smith is one of the best guards in college football and one of the best guard prospects for the 2021 NFL Draft. And the Volunteers like the job that Jeremy Pruitt has done so far, and they rewarded him with a contract extension that should keep him in Knoxville for quite some time. But back to this game, defensively, they're going to be solid. Offensively, they should be able to run the football really well this year, which should help them out not only in this game, but in the SEC long term. For South Carolina, I think they have a lot of good pieces on the football squad as far as defense, run game, O-line, wide receivers. So Will Muschamp has a very solid squad. Where I have a question is at quarterback. Ryan Hilinski, I thought, did a great job for them last year, considering the circumstances with Jake Bentley transferring out. Hilinski lost his job, or was rewarded the job. The job was rewarded to Colin Hill, who transferred in from Colorado State, where he was okay out there with the Rams. So breaking in a new quarterback this year in these circumstances, I just think lends itself to Tennessee winning this ball game. I can trust Jared Garantano more so than Colin Hill. I'm taking Tennessee. And the last game we're going to preview is also in the SEC, and that's Georgia taking on Arkansas. Now, Georgia's defense should be excellent this year, giving them a chance to win a lot of games on their schedule. Safety Richard LeCounte is one of the best in the country as far as making plays on the ball, taking the ball away, being a factor in the alley. Where I have some questions about Georgia is at quarterback. They came into the season all ready to go with Jamie Newman, who is transferring in from Wake Forest, but since he decided to opt out only 2 weeks ago, it puts their position in a little bit of flux. So whether it's JT Daniels or some other quarterback that's out there on the roster, we'll have to see. But they do have a good running back in Zamir White. They do have a very good defense and a solid offensive line, so they should be solid in that regard. For Arkansas, their transfer quarterback, Felipe Franks, who played at Florida, has a wealth of talent around him. You talk about Mike Woods at wide receiver, Rakeem Boyd at running back, Treylon Burks also out there at wide receiver. They have a ton of talent at Arkansas, and Felipe Franks can build on what he was able to showcase the latter part of his career at Florida in that bowl game against Michigan and the early parts of last season, and carry that over into this year. Arkansas has a chance to surprise some people, so I do think this game will be closer than that 26.5 point spread that Vegas has. This will be a very tight game. Expect both teams to come out sputtering a little bit on offense. Georgia's defense is the difference, which is why I'm taking them to knock off the Razorbacks. So that's it for this edition of Football Game Plan's College Football Kickoff. I'm Emory Hunt, the czar of the playbook. Be sure to follow me on all of my social media accounts, and don't forget to check out and subscribe to the Football Game Plan Network, located at youtube.com/footballgameplan. Also subscribe on iTunes to Football Game Plan Podcast and leave us a 5-star rating.